Okay, everybody, how do I look? Good. Welcome to, let me get the lighting correct here. Let's see what we can do. Okay, welcome to our Train the Trainer fecal sampling extraordinary video. Anyway, let's get started right into it. You're not gonna be looking at me that much, so it doesn't really matter. You should all have your notebooks that I sent in the mail, as well as your microscope kits and your slide kits. This notebook backs up everything that we're going to talk about today. This presentation will take about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. I tend to talk quickly. You have the option of either using this actual presentation with me speaking, or you can format it to fit your own liking. I often find that if I present something, I tend to learn it a little bit better than if I just read about it or something. So I think presenting it is a valid way to actually learn a new skill. And this is quite a large skill set ultimately. Really, we're talking about parasite resistance and dewormer resistance from a standpoint of animal welfare. And we're going to use that animal's welfare to tell us and give us clues about what's wrong with the animal. But regardless, just keep in mind that you have this very, very comprehensive notebook that goes over everything you could need and want to learn about actually how the process works. And there's also supplemental information in there that helps guide you towards pasture management techniques that may help mitigate some of your issues, or feeding strategies, or even actual dewormer scheduling itself for how to do it. So let's jump right in here and let's just get through the presentation. So again, you are welcome to use this presentation yourself, or you may follow along and do this one on your own. So here we go. This is my usual standalone picture that goes with the animals. So this presentation wasn't developed and recommended by me, although it was edited, but good people at the University of Maryland Extension, small ruminant education center, have been pushing this stuff for a long time, and it's a great resource to learn more. This stuff is changing every year as we learn more about the processes that these biological organisms are engaged in. So I highly encourage you to keep up with the Maryland Small Ruminant page and or Cornell's offerings on small ruminant parasite control. Susan Shanahan developed this. Like I said, I had some help from Betsy Hodge in St. Lawrence County, and Tatiana Stanton from Cornell, and as well as many other people that have helped support this project. So let's get into this presentation, everybody. So the background, why are we doing this? Anthelmintic resistance, which is dewormers, and targeted selective treatment are what we're really going for. Here's what happens. You take a goat, it gets some parasites. Let's say it has 100 parasites in its body. We give it a dewormer, and 2 of those parasites live, and they come out the other end, and they breed. So now we have, by default, just bred resistance into our flock. That's a problem because anecdotally, there's really no new drugs coming down the pipeline that are specifically for this cause, because there's not enough money in developing drugs for sheep and goat parasite resistance at this point. So the point is, we need to stop that resistance right in its tracks. Otherwise, we're gonna start running out of chemicals real quick, and that'll be a problem for our growers. The way we combat dewormer resistance and parasite resistance is through TST, targeted selective treatment. We're going to just treat the animals that need it. If we don't treat all 10 goats, then we're going to have far less of those resistant parasites coming out the back end of those animals, if that makes sense. So we're trying to make sure that we kill all the parasites when we treat, and we only want to treat when it's necessary. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So we get resistance when our dewormer stops working like it should. That, incredibly, is about 95%. If you're not killing 95% of the parasites, then you have a very good chance of breeding resistance into your flock. So it's not just killing a few, you gotta really get most of them. And typically 98, 99% is really what you're going for. When it does fail, what do we see? We see dead animals. I get calls, my animal just died out of nowhere the other day, it didn't come off its feed, it was acting a little sluggish, but it's just dead. This is how we normally do it. TST, this targeted selective treatment, will allow you to evaluate your animals by using sight and touch, and then possibly, if you need to, the microscope, you can't see this now, to do some fecal samples. So keep that in mind. This is inevitable because we only have so many different drugs. There's only so many companies making this stuff for us. So obviously we have a bigger problem down south where the winters and the summers are warmer and wetter, but that's coming here too. Climate change is real, and it's gonna get warmer and wetter in the Northeast, which means we will have more parasite resistance, okay? This was done a while ago, it looks 2008, 2010, and you can see these are 4 different classes of dewormer, and you can already see that some of these classes in the mid-Atlantic and South region are completely resistant. Like that means these dewormers do not work anymore. Once the other two stop working, then we're really in trouble. So just keep that in mind. This is for the good of the entire industry. Here's some really good ways to make dewormer resistance in your flock. And don't be discouraged if this is something you do, because this is something that people have been recommending for ages, back when this wasn't a problem. Now it's a problem, we can't do these things. So frequent deworming, if you just deworm the same time every year, you know, in April or May, that's a problem, okay? Injecting dewormers into animals and pour-on dewormers aren't as effective. This is, remember, this is inside the animal, it's in intestinal tract. So some of those, you may be wasting chemicals doing that. Persistent activity dewormers, that is like something you put in their feed or a salt block, that will also encourage quicker resistance. Dosing on a full stomach, we want to dose especially goats when they're on an empty stomach, so it's more effective. Again, the name of this game is to be more effective to kill as many worms as possible. Just blanket treating everyone. That's the opposite of what we're doing here. It's targeted selective treatment, because we're targeting the animals we want to treat and just treating them. Now remember, there's obviously a genetic component to this. Some animals, or those of you who do raise them, are always going to be more resistant or less resistant than others. If we can help them and encourage them to grow naturally, we may be able to breed that into our flock or our herd as well. So also improper storage and use of dewormers. There's labels right on the side. Some need to be cool, some need to be warm, some need to be kept out of the sun. Make sure you're reading those labels. So these are practices which accelerate drug resistance. The most common is frequent deworming or deworming on a schedule. The way to combat that is to selectively treat animals. So I talked a little bit about this already. How do you know which ones are working on your farm? This one didn't work, this one did. This will allow you to never be at that level again. By targeted selective treatment, by monitoring your animals, which you should be every day, by the way, if you're a farmer, then you will be able to predict when there's a problem, or you'll be able to see a problem before it becomes a serious problem for you on your farm. So there's a couple of different ways you can test for dewormer resistance on your farm. One of those is the fecal egg count reduction test, which is the easy one to do, which you can do with a microscope, which this lab actually has for you, or you can do a larval assay, which is more complicated, expensive, and involved. So it is possible to do this stuff at home on your own farm, and hundreds and hundreds of people are doing it every month. The fecal count reduction test, which will be covered more in another video, it doesn't have the scope of this class exactly. Basically, you're gonna take a sample, count the worms, treat them with a dewormer, and count the sample again and see how many worms are in it. If you're under 95%, you're in good shape. There are some calculations with that, but we'll get into that in our next little part of this presentation. TST. What this does, a targeted selective treatment, we're going to use 5 different parameters to identify animals that require treatment and identify animals that are not going to benefit from treatment. Again, we talked about there's a genetic component to that, and we don't want to handicap the genetic component by using drugs. We also are trying to specifically avoid resistance by not treating everybody. So, like I said, there's 5 parameters we're going to get into. The first one is FAMACHA. And the overall program we're doing for our targeted selective treatment is called the 5-point check. FAMACHA is the first part of that. FAMACHA system is made up of a couple folks' names from Africa. I'm not sure how they did it, but it's a name amalgamation where they had a big problem with worms. They realized that incidentally, if they were able to check the membranes of these animals, they could see if they were anemic. The reason that's important is because our biggest parasite problem is the barber pole worm, and that worm eats red blood cells. So the more red blood cells it eats, the more anemic and the less blood cells they have in their plasma. And you can physically see that difference. So if you look down here on this card, this FAMACHA card, you'll see an A, B, C, D, and E in 1 through 5. 1 and 2 have check marks next to them because they're good. They don't need to be treated. Doing FAMACHA, exactly how to do it is beyond the scope of this course, but there are plenty of videos, and I have many links in your resource package to learn how to do it. Basically, you're going to pop, push, pull. It's a thing you do to the bottom of the eyelid. You look inside, and you rate the color based on this card. 1 and 2 on this card are not going to need to be treated. They may be affected by the parasite a bit, but they are in totally healthy areas. 3 has a question mark on it because that is one we might want to think about worming. So if we have 5 goats coming by us in a line, we see 1 and 2 are fine, and number 3 is actually number 3. We're going to put a little question mark in there because we're going to use our other factors to determine if we need to treat it. 4 means you need to treat it. It has a picture of a little bolus gun there. And 5, that color, that pale white, means that animal's on its deathbed. Often when I get called, that's the color of the eyelid membranes that I see when I get there. This is targeted selective treatment right off the bat. This is part 1 of our 5-point check. Number 1, already we're breaking down which animals we're going to treat and which we're not. Great. Something I forgot to mention too while we're here is the importance of records. You need to keep good records. You don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. Keep a little notebook in your back pocket. I have a waterproof one I keep with me. And I write down all kinds of stuff in it. And it's always cool to go back and look what was going on before. But it's difficult to remember if you have 20 goats, which one looked bad and you're doing the FAMACHA, which one looks good. So make sure you're taking that data. So that's the first thing is FAMACHA. There are limitations to FAMACHA because it's not going to tell you, it's like those number threes, you're not going to know really exactly if you're going to have to treat. So the 5-point check addresses those issues. It allows us to know if we really do need to treat these animals with a dewormer, because ultimately we want to treat the fewest animals possible to get the best results, right? I'm going to go through each of these 5-point checks. So they start with I, the back, which is body condition, DAG score, which is soiling, bottle jaw, and the last one's different for sheep and goats. For goats, we look at their coat. For sheep, we look for nasal bots. So let's get right into it here. Here actually is the 5-point check that you're going to be using. So the first one we said is the I, and that's the FAMACHA card. We already know there's 5 different things you could be on that card. What's cool over here is this tells you the possibilities of worms that are likely to be causing your problems. So if you have a constellation of symptoms, you can look on here and see probably what worms are affecting you. Now this is important because right off the bat, I can tell you barber pole worm, which is our biggest killer, does not cause scours or diarrhea. So that's a big thing to know right off the bat. Number 2 is back, which we'll go over, which is body condition score. We'll talk about how we rate that and what worms could be causing that. DAG score, you look over here at DAG score, you see there isn't a barber pole on there because we know that barber pole worm does not cause diarrhea. So again, this allows us to make some decisions based on the constellation of symptoms. Some of these symptoms do occur with Johnson's disease, but I'll get to that in a different slide. So those are our 5 conditions we're going to be looking for a TST. Again, back to FAMACHA from blood feeding parasites. That's really what this test is looking for on the mucous membrane. It's not something you can just do. You need to be certified. There's a whole certification course that you can take, and that information that is in your packet to certify you as both a FAMACHA teacher and a FAMACHA practitioner. So that doesn't mean this is something you can't learn on your own, and I recommend that you give it a shot. But you definitely need to see someone do this because you could cause injury to your animals. So keep that in mind. Our second thing we're checking for after our membranes is body condition score, BCS, okay? A lot of worms cause loss of body condition because they're eating the nutrients before the animal can absorb them into the lining of their stomachs and intestines. They're stealing their food. Now, you can also have poor body condition from old age, or disease, and that's true, or other worms. So that's why when we score these, we're gonna look at all the different 5 aspects, not just one. Now, when we do our body condition score, this is a really great way to do it. You can line them all up. You really need to physically touch the animals. You just can't look at them, especially sheep. Sheep have a whole bunch of wool on them. But you're not going to just look at them and see if they are skinny or if they have a low body condition score. So basically what we're doing is we're going to put our hand on the animal's back and feel its spinal process, the lines on its spine where the spinal cord runs through. By touching that, and the more you do this, the better you'll get at it, you can determine the body condition score of that animal. Let me see. One way that I like to do this and to teach beginners is this way, okay? There's 5 different things on here, just like FAMACHA. Number 5 is obese. If you put your hand on that animal's spine and it feels like the muscle on your arm, that animal is obese, okay? You can't feel anything there. A 4 would be like running your hand over the process and getting your wrist bone here. That's a 4. You can still feel some bone in there. The animal's probably a little big and there's a lot of fat they're carrying. That's detrimental in the summer. Fat animals are not healthy animals. A good condition score would be something more like your knuckles. You're going to feel some roundness there. You're going to feel the processes of the spinal column, but they're not super skinny. When they start to get really thin, it's going to start to feel like this, really jagged. I mean, you can feel more of the actual spinal column, more of those bones and those processes around there. And then very thin would be my fingertips, like spiky. So again, let's say we have 5 goats. We have 2 of them that we would classify as thin and 2 of them as 4s, which is classified as fat on here. Both of them are not the best case scenario. The big ones should probably come down, but the thin ones, we need to figure out what's going on with them. So by comparing our other issues, the constellation of symptoms, we can go back to that original description of what worms cause what and try to narrow down more of what's going on with our animals. But most parasites are going to cause a loss of body condition. So just remember, you need to touch the animals to do it. You have to be close to them. You have to find a way to catch them. Same with FAMACHA. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? That's body condition score. Here's some pictures of what I'm actually talking about here. You can see one What I'm saying, it's spiky. There's no fat cover there, so you can feel all that. We get over here into 4 and 5, you can see how the fat cover has grown a lot. And that's why when we feel the back of that animal, we can't feel the spine. All of these fact sheets and videos are in your resources notebook. So feel free to look at it some more, including body condition scores specifically for sheep and goats that you can go look through. Okay, number 3 is our DAG score. DAG is manure stuck on the back of an animal. So we're looking at the fecal soiling amount and scaling that as well too. Lots of parasites can cause scours. So, but also can stress and other things in the environment. So again, just seeing this one symptom is not going to tell you what's going on with the animal. Perfect example, my goats the other day had scours, both of them. I was like, well, that's weird because they haven't been out. Well, I found out they got into a grain bag and it caused them to scour a little bit. So, again, it's just part of the constellation of things. These are some great pictures here of what poor DAG scores look like. These sheep are obviously covered in manure. That's a great way to get bots. And this goat obviously has very, very runny manure as well. The back end of an animal should be very clean most of the time. Here's our DAG scoring levels. So 0 would be nothing back there. 1 would be a slight. Then 5 we get up to really severe watery diarrhea. You can see there too that if on the 3 it says consider treatment, just like number 3 with the FAMACHA. Number 4 says treatment recommended. Number 5 says treatment essential. What treatment? Well, we don't know what it is yet. Again, we need to take our 5 different scores we can put on our score sheet, go back and look at what the most likely culprit for those constellation of symptoms would be, and then treat via recommended doses. Now, here's some more pictures. These are in your resources too of how to score those DAG scores. And you can see a skull and crossbone down here on number 5. Different countries use different numbers, so it's up to you which one you want to use. But the point is that you're looking at your animals every day. You're going to know when that DAG score changes. You'll know right away within a day if something's really off. Now, those of you who do raise ruminants know that in the spring, the grass is considered washy, which means it's mostly water, and that can cause scours as well. So keep that in mind. So if you have animals that have been on hay for a while and finally get on a grass, if you change their diet, if you give them new minerals, especially stuff with salt in it, you may see some really severe scours out of that animal. But again, we're going to use the rest of that animal's health, its body condition score, maybe FAMACHA, look at the herd, what else is going on with them, and we'll know that this is more than likely a dietary issue overall. So just something else to consider as you're going through and scoring these things. Okay, we're already on to number 4. This is great. Number 1 was FAMACHA. Number 2 was body condition. Number 3 was DAG score. Here we are, number 4, bottle jaw. This is a great indication of anemia and really is most often seen with barber pole worm, although Yonis can cause it also. It's a fluid, accumulation of fluid under the jaw, resulting from blood loss. People get anemia on their legs because they're standing most of the day, but animals have their head below their heart because they're eating grass. That means that fluid accumulates in the jaw here. This is a great example of this goat that has bottle jaw right now. You can really see it's deformed from that. So typically, this is usually going to be barber pole worm, but there are some other blood-feeding parasites that can cause this. Another reason to take a look at your animal. So if you just saw bottle jaw with a really good FAMACHA score, that animal's very healthy. It's a number 3 as far as our body condition scores goes and has no scours. Then we're going to take a step back and try to think about what that could possibly be on our chart that tells us what parasites may be affecting. Because that could be a few different things. We're not exactly sure. Again, I talked about this Johne's disease. It's caused by bacteria. It used to be a lot more common than it is. There are some tests for it now. It's caused by bacteria. Typically, people are going to see weight loss when they start noticing this. And again, that's your body condition score catching up to you. This animal would probably rate, a 4 or 5, as in like it's pretty, a 1 or 2, whatever. As in that it's pretty skinny. If you put your hand along the top of that animal, felt its spine, you would be able to feel those spinal processes very easy. So just keep that in mind, that other things can cause bottle jaw. Number 1 is FAMACHA. Number 2 is body condition. Number 3 is DAG score. Number 4 is bottle jaw. And here we are on number 5, our last factor. So you thought this was going to be so complicated, but it's not that bad, especially when it's written down in front of you. So we split this into 2 different things. For goats, we're going to use the coat condition, and for sheep, we're going to use nasal bot flies, or the presence of. You know what a thrifty animal looks like. Again, if you're a farmer, you see your animals every day. You know what they look like. You know when they're healthy. You know how they're acting when they're healthy. These 2 animals have very different coats. The one on my left is plump and shiny, has the hair whorls on it. That's a hormonal healthy sign. That's great. The one on the other side is obviously pretty ragged. That hair coat doesn't look good. When you start getting raggedy, even in the summer months, when you should have lost all that like winter coat hair, if that sticks around for a while, that usually indicates a wormy animal to me in my cow herd. I can tell who needs to be treated by their hair coat, literally. So they're using a 1 to 3 scoring system here, where 2 is the average coat quality. It's up to you which way you want to go. If 1 is best and 3 is worse. But again, another indication. If you see an animal that has a poor coat quality, then mark it on your list and check it the next day and keep checking it. And then start looking for those other symptoms that may be indicative of different kinds of parasites that are affecting your animals, okay? 5 is coat condition for goats, but for sheep, we're looking for nasal bots. Now, this is not something that's prevalent in the Northeast. It's more of a tropical problem. But can you imagine, and I don't mean to gross y'all out, but if you had a worm living inside your nose, you'd be pretty uncomfortable. And that causes a lot of stress to that animal, including weight loss and sickness. So it's still something to be aware of. There's no reason you shouldn't look on your sheep's nose, and because they can get other bot flies in them too, from fly strike, whether it's on their back end or after giving birth, or even up front, I believe. So not the most prevalent thing here, but a nasal bot is a big enough parasite around the world that they have targeted in this presentation. So I want to mention real quick FAMACHA again. We saw in the number 3 score that we're not really sure if we should be treating that animal with a dewormer, because again, we want to go light on the dewormer. So it's time to look around at the other goats or sheep that are in your field. So if you have a 3 out there and the others don't, how are the other goats looking? Is everybody looking a little pale? How's the fecal consistency, like we talked about? How's the body condition score? Are these animals acting, behaving, and looking normal? Because that's important. And then when the last time you did the FAMACHA was. When I get a FAMACHA 3, usually what I'd like to do is wait a day or 2. If everybody else is seeming pretty normal and healthy, that 1's in there, I will just wait and keep monitoring that animal. But I have a record of it the day it started. I know who it was, and I know who I'm going to check up on. Some animals have naturally light mucous membranes. So you may have an animal that's a 3 for its whole life and be perfectly healthy. So keep that in mind. Okay. The next presentation I'm going to do, not in this one, is going to be how to do the fecal sampling. Each of these counties now has a lab set up where you can come in and use the microscope and the materials once you have taken the course and understand how to do these checks. They work really great because they will give you another line of defense on if you need to treat your animal for worms. Basically what you do is you collect manure, you're going to put it on this slide, put it under a microscope, and count the number of eggs you can see on that slide. Depending on the number of eggs that are there, will tell you if you need to treat that animal or if that animal is at levels high enough to treat. This really focuses on barber pole worm, although truthfully, we can't tell what worm is what in the egg form, which is what you're looking at in this microscope. But, sorry, my dog just walked in. So basically, this thing is really going to be more for barber pole worm, but it's super important. You can take a representative sample of your whole flock. You can target a certain animal, see if they're treatable, and you can keep those scores written down. It's great. Typically, a vet is going to charge you about $20, $30 to do these, and that's fine if you don't like doing them. But if you are close to the lab and you've taken the course, this may be a great opportunity to save yourself some money. We've been running the lab for 4 years in Ulster County now, and my numbers have dwindled because most of my producers have ended up biting the bullet and buying their own lab. It's really only about $140, I think, to buy all the stuff for it. So that may be you someday if you're this serious about raising sheep and goats. Oh, and one other thing I forgot the fecal egg count does is count your fecal reduction score if your dewormers are actually still working. So that's a really big help to do that. Just that alone is worth it because you know what you're already resistant to. And remember, if you bought those animals from down south from Richmond flock, they may have brought that resistance with them. So keep that in mind. How to take a good fecal sample. I'm just going to run through this real quick. If you are going to do it, use baggies, label them. Obviously, it's best to get these animals, you know, they poop when they wake up in the morning, they stand up. So that's a good time to get them if you need to get a certain animal. Otherwise, if you've got to get a certain one from a specific animal, you may just have to be patient and spend an extra hour or so with your animals. When we do the other part of the class, I'll go over some more specifics on how to get a fecal sample out of an animal, where you actually reach into the rectum and grab it. It's not uncomfortable for the animal, but it's a little outside the scope of just right now. We're just really focusing on the 5-point check. So those are our 5 parts, and the next part of this video series is going to be how to do the manure sampling. But I want to mention this. People don't realize this. The primary cause of parasitism is overstocking and overgrazing, period, with ruminant animals and pretty much all animals. Nature works at a certain number and consistency in the wild that it can support. We are running absolutely unnatural numbers of animals in unnatural environments with these goats and sheep. Sheep and goats are from, I mean, at least goats are from the Middle East. They're from arid environments. That's another reason they have a tough time here. And another reason why copper is so difficult for sheep to absorb. They didn't grow up with it. So anyway, if you have severe parasite problems, the number one thing you can do is start changing up your grazing program or changing up your stocking or how you're doing those things or when you're doing them. And I'm very happy to help you talk about that. I rotate my animals on a daily or twice daily basis, typically my cattle. And it has really changed my animals, my daily chores, and the health of both the pastures and the cattle. So again, if you're having parasite problems, if you go all the way back to the beginning, it's really an overstocking issue. So just keep that in mind, because that's a good way that without using dewormers, we can target and make that a better situation for you. Now we're going to get into a couple specifics. Again, this is all in your resource packet, and I would recommend you take some time to sit down and review this. But there's 4 classes of chemical classes of dewormers, and these are them right here, and these are the classes that they fall into. We talked about the fecal reduction set. This has changed recently. The best way for you to treat your animals is to use a combination treatment, not just one at a time. We used to recommend that you rotate dewormers, and then they realized this was actually making the problem even worse. And I'm not going to get into it because it's technical, but the best thing you can do is to use combination treatments using the recommended dosages in your packet for sheep and goats, because they are different. So right here, here's a great chart on which dewormer to use. So if you have animal with a 4 or 5 on the FAMACHA, no scours, losing weight, then you got to use the most effective dewormer. If you have a low risk FAMACHA score, that 3 we're not sure if we're going to even treat, then we hold off treating, then we realize we got to do, you're going to use your less effective dewormer on that. Also, there's a guide here for what to use for tapeworms, which I do see, and Betsy was nice enough to remind me that she has seen, especially young animals, perish from tapeworm infections. I do see a lot of tapeworms in animals, but I've never had levels enough that I thought was enough to treat. Again, I just want to say that parasites can sometimes actually be part of an animal's life cycle. It can possibly improve its resistance and actually make it healthier through an immune response. So every time you see a worm doesn't mean you need to blast it off this earth with chemicals. Meaning we need to take a look at them. Meningeal worm, real quick, when I mentioned this, I'm getting calls about it this year, also known as deer worm. Not a lot of effective treatments for this. If you see a goat or a sheep with paralysis or walking in circles or something that looks neurological, more often than not, it's the deer worm, and those are spread via slugs and snails in wet areas of pasture. So if I come out or you call me and tell me you have a couple animals that are infected with this, I'm going to ask you what areas you've been grazing and if we can switch those when it's wet out there. Again, this is a great chart to help you decide what dewormer to use when the time comes. Ectoparasites I want to talk about real quick, because we certainly do see ticks. I've had Lyme twice in the last 2 years. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But there are no validated Lyme disease tests for these animals. There are some, there are more clusters of and constellations of symptoms that are caused by Lyme in animals. But your best prevention is probably to be checking your animals and see if they are highly infested. And if they are, you can use Ultra Boss or certain other types of chemicals as applied on the skin every 2 weeks topically on them to keep the ticks off you. It's not as much as an issue with breeding resistance in the ticks. They don't breed as fast, they're much slower, but they can be nasty and they can certainly hurt animals, especially in high numbers. All right, that's it. That's our 5-point check. I want to go back real quick to a slide. Again, I appreciate you guys paying attention. This is a big deal. We're trying to help you be better growers. A big thank you to Betsy of St. Lawrence, and Tatiana, and all the growers who are out there every day. I see you. I see you on the horizon with your sheep and goats. Call me. Call your extension. We're here to help. But before I get to that, I just want to go all the way back to all this stuff we've gone over right to here. This is our 5-point check. If you learn any from this course, here's what it is. Do not blanket treat all of your animals. Do not deworm animals at the same time every year. And do not treat them on a schedule every month. That's how you will breed resistance in your animals. Use a targeted selective treatment where you look at your animals and make a note about them. Make a whole day of it. Invite your friends over who like your goats. Put them through a shoot. You can make a homemade shoot and give them the scores list. Run your FAMACHA. Run your body condition score. Check the DAG score. Then you could sit down after you do all 20 or 30 goats, if you need to, and decide who you want to get a fecal sample from, right? Because then we can really test to see if that animal has a lot of worms in its manure and if we need to treat it right then and there. That's the gist of it. The less we treat the animals, the less resistance we will have, and the better off and healthier the goats and you will be as well. So anyway, my name is Jason Detzel. I work for the extension in Ulster County, and I run a cattle farm in Columbia County, New York. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me, jbd222@cornell.edu, jbd222@cornell.edu, or contact your local extension agent area that is helping you run this program yourself. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoy this presentation, and stay tuned for more. All right, thanks.